In war, under oath, and in love, not everyone gets what they deserve. You see, real life isn't like the movies. Sometimes the villain does win. Sometimes the hero tragically fails. And sometimes, everyone forgets about the greatest game of a generation.
Good morning, Morgan. Today is Monday, March 15, 2032.
Good morning, Morgan. You're not going to like what I have to say next.
Prey originally came out in 2017, and upon release was met with reviews reserved for only the most atrocious of games. And I get it. When I first played, I stopped almost immediately the first time I saw a mimic. Ain't nobody want to deal with that. But I couldn't scratch the feeling that something was special about this game. And when I did finally come back, I was glued to my screen for the rest of the playthrough. Prey was not only the best immersive sim game I've ever played, but quite possibly just one of the greatest games ever made. Full stop. I'm not here to talk about Prey though. For as good and underappreciated as it is, there actually is an even more tragic tale in this story. Prey Mooncrash, a DLC released for the base game a year after its release, is perhaps not only better than the actual base game of Prey, but because of the low sales, bad initial reviews, and an undeservedly small fan base, quite possibly the most underrated game of all time. You are an unknown hacker named Peter. You awaken aboard a space station orbiting the moon, with a Chasma Corporation bounty being held above your head. In order to be released from your mysterious floating prison to see your family again, you must work off this bounty by running a simulation over and over to find out what has happened on moon base codenamed Pythias. The research base was experimenting on an alien organism called the Typhon, who we meet in the main game, and it's our job to put the pieces together in this murder mystery through the use of our countless tools. And you see, this is where the genius of Mooncrash begins. In each of your runs through the simulation, you select one of 5 different characters, all unlocked through past runs, that have their own sets of skills, abilities, backstories, and personalities. Your goal is to have all 5 characters escape the moon base in one run of the simulation, which progressively gets more corrupted and difficult as time passes on. And not only that, but everything you do on each character in each run carries over to the next, meaning you must escape through all 5 escape routes separately with each character, all while dealing with the repercussions of your past actions, consideration of how to pool your resources for your future self, and all with a countdown timer slowly signaling your doom. On the surface, it sounds stressful, but one of the biggest things about Mooncrash is that it somehow isn't. The first thing this game gets so right is something most games struggle with constantly, and that's the pacing and conditioning. Everything on paper about this game screams for you to go as fast as you can and to hurry between objectives. But because the player is conditioned right from the first run of the game to become accustomed to failure and dying, it shapes us to be content with going slow in the future. In other games like Cyberpunk and Mass Effect 3, some of my personal favorites of all time, the urgency of the main quest and its dire consequences means you have trouble not rushing. Otherwise, nothing makes thematic sense. But in Mooncrash, because the entire gameplay loop is built around failure, it encourages the player to embrace it. Every loss is just another chance for the player to learn, and another time we're able to uncover more story and secrets, all which lead us to knowing how to win in future runs. When you first step foot on the moon base, you don't know about any of the locations. You don't know about the secret underground tunnels that let you sneak into certain spots, or the hidden passage behind the bathroom to get into Riley Rue's office. You don't know about the tram system and how to power it to quickly get between research facilities. You don't know about the secret hidden stash of loot above the beds in some bedrooms. In each simulation run, you do acquire a currency called sim points that allows you to purchase items based on schematics you have found in previous runs to help you in your playthrough. But all of these items only become useful because of the most important currency you get between each run: knowledge. It's what makes the base game of Prey so great, taken to a greater extent, by allowing the player to solve a myriad of puzzles in any way they see fit, becoming more powerful not just through RPG progression systems, but by learning more about how to tackle the game and its systems themselves. And that leads us to the next genius thing Mooncrash does. It forces the player to be uncomfortable. You see, in the base game of Prey, while there are a ton of ways to solve every problem, most players will probably just settle into one. Whether it's sneaking past every enemy using hidden doors, using your mimic powers to transform into small objects and going through holes in the wall, or going in guns blazing. In the base game, players usually will pick a build and stick to it, because after all, they would be at a disadvantage not to after spending all their neuromod upgrades on that one thing. But in Mooncrash, each of those 5 characters you play as in the simulation runs are completely different. One can endlessly spawn turrets and upgrade them, making fighting enemies trivial. Another has the ability to hack into computer systems, something none of the others can do. And another yet is the only one who can repair broken doors and robots you find on the moon base. This means that instead of being a jack of all trades, like Morgan in the main game, you instead must play to each character's strengths and solve many obstacles in new ways you may never have in the base game. And this complexity only gets more interesting, because each simulation run isn't the same. The state of the game carries over between characters in a run, but between different runs, not so much. One run might start with all the power out around the station, meaning you can more easily traverse through the Typhon gates blocking your way, but you can't use the tram system. While another may start with a door that you were used to going through being completely broken down and in need of repairs. This means that as you are learning about each character and the world is also learning about you, constantly throwing new obstacles and curveballs at you. Where most games' difficulty comes from enemies getting more health and killing you more quickly, the real difficulty in Mooncrash comes from your ability to have a deep understanding of the game and effectively solve all the problems it can throw at you. Sure, the enemies do get stronger over time as the simulation corrupts, but that's a constant. The variable difficulty comes from the changes to the environment itself and how to get those escape routes between them. And this sort of challenge is so much more rewarding than how most games handle difficulty. Instead of me simply having to have a more optimal build for my character and having to sit there shooting the boss longer because of his larger health pool, in Mooncrash, I have to actually think about all the challenges that come before me and use what I've learned from previous runs to figure out what to do. A perfect example of this comes from one of my later runs where I was using Riley Yu, one of the weaker characters who's mostly just good for mind control and hacking, but I was trying to get through a Typhon gate in my way blocking me. The issue was that the Typhon gate wasn't opening because tons of super over-leveled aliens were surrounding me on a very high level of corruption, meaning they could all probably one-shot me and I stood no chance. But I remembered back to one time I had used my stun gun on a previous run on a vending machine, and it had caused it to turn off momentarily, letting me get a bunch of free loot. And I thought maybe I should try that on the Typhon gate. And lo and behold, it worked, and I was able to slip past its field just in time for it to reactivate as the Typhon aliens awoke and started to charge. I didn't beat this encounter because of an over-leveled character, a perfect build, or a super strong new item I found. I beat it using my existing knowledge of the game world and its rules. And what makes Mooncrash so immaculate is it is entirely built around this principle. The game is hard, but more importantly, it's fair. Every time I died, I learned what I could do better. Every time I tried something new, I thought of ways I could apply that in the future. More than almost any other game I've played, Mooncrash forced me to actually think and rewarded me appropriately for doing so. And it wasn't a difficulty like Elden Ring, where your skill in game mechanics dictates your success, but rather your ability to problem solve and think on the fly. In order to actually get all 5 characters out in one run, you have to manage things like bringing specific characters in order to hack through doors you noticed were closed on that run. You have to then bring another character to hack into a terminal in that room you got into to unlock the ability to repair on another. And you have to use specific abilities of each character in new ways to solve problems you haven't ever seen before on the fly in each run. In a lot of ways, Mooncrash is almost training you to do speedrunning, as by the time you're actually good enough to get all 5 characters off the moon base and unlock the final ending story sequence, you've garnered a mastery of the game and its systems, and it feels so damn empowering. And the real best thing the game does is it manages to have all the great story moments, sound design, creepy encounters, great gameplay, and interesting challenges of the base game, but it forces the player to be uncomfortable. It's a weird reality that making your player feel bad at times actually makes them feel better in the long run, but it makes sense. When I used to play Dota 2 a lot growing up, I didn't like it because I won all the time and it was easy. I liked it because it was really hard, and that made those moments where I did play well so much greater. It's the same in Mooncrash. It can be a huge challenge at times. It requires you to constantly think on your toes and solve actually challenging obstacles. It has a timer that always slowly is progressing to making the game more difficult, which does give the player some anxiety, and they can't just win the game taking it at their own pace. And that's why Mooncrash specifically is the greatest immersive simulation game ever made. It forces players into hard and stressful situations, and with great pacing slowly adds challenge and complexity, all with the extremely deep gameplay systems we come to love and expect from the genre. It's funny because Arcane's next game, Deathloop, actually built off this game's premise, but it did it so much worse. You see, in Deathloop there was always a journal update that told you exactly what to do. There was no timer forcing you to be uncomfortable. And in a lot of ways, it was a game based on the same premise, but not on the same philosophy. Where Deathloop held the player's hand the whole way through, Prey Mooncrash trusted us the entire time to figure it out for ourselves. And maybe that's why Mooncrash, and hell, Prey, never really did that well. After all, it's pretty obvious nowadays people don't like taking responsibility for themselves and having to actually solve their own issues. But if you do actually give Mooncrash the time and do dedicate yourself to playing it, I promise you will come out on the other end appreciating one of the most tragically underloved and not talked about games of all time. More than anything, Mooncrash shows what makes games so great. Because games as a medium are the only ones that can give us the satisfaction of actually accomplishing something, of overcoming genuine challenges, and having to actually solve problems on our own, of discovering a story for ourselves through our own actions, and being given a blank canvas on which we can paint our own journey. When I finally beat Prey Mooncrash and successfully got all 5 characters off that demented rock with just enough time to spare, I realized just how far I had come from where I started. Not because of the upgrades I got, but because of how I had changed how I thought about the game. I appreciated every system more. Every bit of lore was more interesting because I had to work for it. And I valued my time with the game because it valued its time with me. I finished a lot of games where I was proud of the creators for creating an amazing story and experience, but I haven't finished a lot of games where I was proud of myself. It's crazy that after some of the greats, like Deus Ex, Half-Life, and System Shock were so lauded for decades, a game that is fundamentally better on every level and has expanded upon the great templates and formulas these games created, seems to have been completely forgotten and ignored by everyone.